raise money for his army. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte, born this day, August 15th, 1769. Though emperor for life, disasters in Russia and later Waterloo led to his banishment to the island of St. Helena. There, Napoleon wrote, "Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and myself founded empires upon force. Christ founded his upon love, and at this hour, millions would die for him."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at VCYAmerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us here on Crosstalk. I dislike saying it, but I have to. Here we go again. Yesterday, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak of monkeypox, now referred to as Mpox, in Africa as a public health emergency of international concern. This is based upon the increase in cases and also in the number of deaths that have taken place. The declaration was made in Geneva by Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO. This is the highest level of alarm the World Health Organization can convey. So we're going to touch on this issue today. We're also going to be taking a look at the impact of diversity, equity, and inclusion and how that is impacting the training of those going into our medical schools and the current medical profession. We'll be talking about the physician shortage that is taking place across this land and the influx of the use of physician assistants. We'll also be taking a look at the candidates for president and vice president, their views, and how healthcare will be impacted. Joining us today, we welcome back Twyla Braze, the president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom. They're a national patient-centered, privacy-focused, free market policy organization to support healthcare choices, individualized patient care, and medical and genetic privacy. Twyla is a certified public health nurse, author of the multiple award-winning book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records. She's a speaker on the Daily Health Freedom Minute, heard on stations across the nation. Twyla, welcome back here to Crosstalk.
Well, it is always good to be here. Thanks so much, Jim.
So let's begin with this health emergency declared by the WHO yesterday, covering Africa, pertaining to Mpox. Tedros has said there are more than 14,000 reported cases, some 524 reported deaths in Africa this year, and it's of international concern. What's your response?
Well, I wonder if they would have done such an emergency declaration in the pre-COVID time. It seems to me like, they just are playing a little loose with this idea of such a global emergency. There have been absolutely no cases in the United States. If I recall correctly, this is typically caught particularly within the homosexual population. So it has more limited reach. And so to make it a global emergency of the highest kind is perhaps just to keep their power and their presence in the news while they try to figure out how they can reclaim the power that they once had under the COVID pandemic.
Well, you are well familiar with the push that they had to pass this pandemic treaty by the end of May. It's though it didn't pass, they're still really working on this behind the scenes. But Twyla, if that treaty had passed, the WHO would have all kinds of international power at this point, and countries would have to bow down to them.
Well, if it had passed, if the United States had actually signed on to it, and if the state governors, gave up their 10th Amendment rights to control, I would say maybe. But really, the fact of the matter is the World Health Organization has no power under the Constitution of the United States. It cannot breach our sovereignty. Mm-hmm. And so they continually act as though they can, and the news continually talks about the power that they will have as though it were true, but it's not true because the Constitution doesn't let you do something, even if you write it or say it or sign a paper about it. It doesn't let you do something that is actually unconstitutional.
Yeah, although sometimes we turn our heads to the side and close our eyes to it, just like they're doing with, the Paris Accord, the climate change treaty. Not a treaty. It does not have sovereignty over us, but yet our leadership has just acquiesced to the tenets of this agreement.
Well, and that is true, but that is a leadership that has either never cared about their oath of office or now is completely disregarding it for other, political agendas. And that sort of thing, it's very hard to sue against these, but the fact of the matter is at some point, I think there will be lawsuits if those kind of accords and treaties and all sorts of things are, really signed and really implemented, and people will actually sue to make it stop.
Twyla Bray's with us today, and I find it interesting. We had this declaration take place yesterday from the World Health Organization. I also find it interesting that Dr. Robert Redfield, former director of the CDC, said not too long ago, it's not a question of if, it's more a question of when we will have a bird flu pandemic. Twyla, is the stage being set for a worldwide pandemic, or is this just due diligence that's going on?
Well, I think there might be two things. It is possible that somebody has done gain-of-function research with bird flu. That is what some of the news is talking about, that kind of thing could then be, I don't know, should we say escaped or released or whatever as happened with COVID, and then you could end up with it being more widely spread than it is today. But you might recall that a lot of the bird flu, the people who have gotten bird flu have had like eye infections, minor eye infections or eye irritation or red eyes, right? It hasn't been a very big deal. So, in some ways you've got to wonder what all of the clamoring is to just do pandemic after pandemic after pandemic, and maybe just as you said, they really want, the World Health Organization really wants to get this power over the not the nation, over the world, and the powers that be, like the World Economic Forum, they probably want that too, and so there are a lot of powers that would just as soon have all the control back that they had during COVID times.
Yeah, and gain of function can go many, many different adverse directions.
Many.
Yeah.
Yes.
Twyla, also I want to make note of, with we're talking about resurgence of COVID as well. There are a number of agencies, even communities, that are urging for a return to masking. What are your thoughts on that?
Masking doesn't work, and it never worked. And as a matter of fact, it has all sorts of other negative ramifications, including how many times people just put their hands up to their face. I mean, it's, people kind of forget this, but that was one of the things that they talked back about in the very beginning when they weren't actually mandating it, is how it causes people to touch their face and therefore bring more germs to their eyes and to their mouth and to their nose, right? All these orifices, right? Mm-hmm. And so, but the fact of the matter is, it has never worked. So there should be nobody clamoring for masks. There should be nobody believing in masks working, because they don't work. And if you look at some of the experts, like Dr. Claire Craig in England has wrote a wonderful book, and it's called Expired. And the very first, 3 chapters maybe, just talk about how COVID, like every other virus, moves around the world on air currents, etc., and how it only takes out a certain segment of the population before it moves on, and then it comes back and takes another segment of the population, then comes back and takes another segment. By that I don't mean killing them, but infecting them. And that is how viruses have always worked. And so it moves around the world on air, and you can't prevent air from coming through your mask and in your mask and around your mask and, the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. Twyla, just a couple of weeks ago, and I did an interview on Crosstalk, they held a World Pandemic Preparedness Summit. It was held in Rio de Janeiro. And Twyla, they're working on an mRNA vaccination, that's what they call it, in which it is their goal to have one developed within 100 days of any given pandemic that's declared. Is this not problematic?
Well, it's very problematic. I do not think that we even yet understand the extent to which not even just the spike itself, which was carried by the mRNA and created by the mRNA, but all the parts of that mRNA vaccine or shot, right? And like the lipid nanoparticles, all of those things which, traveled around the body. We have all of these injured people from these shots. Where did the injury come from? Did it come from the spike protein itself? Did it come from the lipid nanoparticles? Did it come from the too much DNA in the shot itself? Right, but there's a lot of things that we don't know, and the idea that they are deciding that mRNA is the way to go should make every person in the world step back and say, I don't think so. We don't know enough about this technology to understand all the negatives, all of the side effects, all of the dangers for putting this thing in your body and letting it sit there. Remember how they said it was only going to stay in your arm, and then it was just like going to go away? But of course, they have found parts of it, the lipid nanoparticles. They found parts of it in all parts of the body. A Japanese study that found 40% of it in the ovaries. And those were the lipid nanoparticles, not even the spike. So, there's a lot that we don't know, and nobody should be thinking that mRNA is a safe way to do any kind of a shot.
But they will be looking to do this within 100 days of a declared pandemic and put this in people's arms.
Well, and people have, hopefully a lot of people have learned a whole lot from COVID, and they will not stand for that. And they will not stand to be fired. They will not stand to be forced to be injected. They will not stand for all sorts of things. And
on one other note here, I saw this just before coming to the studio about Children's Health Defense reporting that 5 European Union countries in September, just coming up very quickly, will pilot the newly developed European vaccination card that consolidates all vaccination data, one location. Countries like Belgium, Germany, Greece, Latvia, and Portugal all set to be a part of the new test for this new card.
You've got to wonder about the European Union. I mean, where is it going? Is it trying to become, like a socialist republic? Is it trying to become its own, dictatorship? I think that there's a great concern that it's always been considered to be one of the Western nations, one of the more free, but it is moving in a direction that is definitely not about freedom. And as you probably know, I think they have jailed like 1,000 people for things that they said wasn't on the internet just recently. And so the entire union, the entire European Union, maybe not all the states, but a lot of them are moving into tyranny and away from freedom, and that should concern all of us.
It really should, because often what initiates there makes its way across the ocean here to the U.S. as well.
Well, thankfully, we have a history of making our way away from there and creating a brand new country of freedom, and that is freedom that we have to keep no matter what Europe does, no matter what England does, no matter what any of those countries do over there.
Twyla, we're unfolding a lot of information today. We've got just a minute before a break, but let's introduce this topic here. I know you're very concerned about what you call dangerous DEI practices in medicine. Unfold for us what's happening.
Yes, well, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is really a discriminatory agenda against white people. I think that's probably the best way to say it. This whole idea that curriculum in medical schools need now to be changed to make sure that certain things happen, certain mindsets of medical students are embraced. They must embrace the DEI agenda. They must embrace that white people are privileged. They must embrace that other colors of people are, victims and that they are the oppressed. All of that stuff is part of the DEI agenda, and they're trying to force the doctors in medical training. They've paid a lot of money to get there, to become a doctor, and suddenly they want them to embrace these ideas.
We're going to pick up with this topic after the break. We're speaking today with Twyla Braze, president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Their website, cchfreedom.org. We've got this to unfold yet, many more topics today, as well as information about an important event, coming up in early October. We'll be back in 1 minute here on Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, have you ever seen drawings of dinosaur-like creatures on rock walls?
Yes, Chris, I have seen them, and they are amazing. People from every continent have drawn pictures and fashioned art objects after the likeness of dinosaurs. These predate our modern discovery of dinosaur fossils, proof that man and dinosaur lived together. Evolutionists, of course, dismiss these as fanciful dream tales. They believe that the amazing dinosaurs, with all their internal complexity and the DNA code, could evolve by chance random processes. Maybe it's easier to think that wind and water erosion produced these dinosaur pictographs on the rocks. I'm being fanciful, of course, but at least the back to Genesis viewpoint is consistent within itself.
If you'd like to go back to Genesis, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org. For the Institute for Creation Research, I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, friends, another health emergency has been declared yesterday by the World Health Organization. We've talked on that already. We're also talking about a number of current health care challenges that are going on, and you're impacted by it, no matter where you are across this country. And part of that is what is going on in our medical schools and the training of the next doctors and nurses, and certainly those who are getting additional training right now who are existing in the medical profession. And it concerns the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. And Twyla, what you're saying is that what's going on in medical schools is a push for those in training that they must embrace DEI structure and DEI standards.
Right. So they must embrace this whole idea of discriminating against their patients for one patient rather than another patient. And so this is not something that we should ever have in our medical system. We should have doctors who look at you according to the conditions that are racing through your body, right? Not the color of your skin. And this whole idea that we are going to make our doctors discriminators, that we're going to make them practice discrimination, or we're going to make them look at you according to your color and decide what you should have and what you can't have. You know, this is just really, really dangerous. We do not want our doctors to be activists in the exam room. We want them to take care of us, to look at us as individuals, to see the kind of care that we need, not because of our color, not because of our identity even, all of those things. But that is, you know, this like DEI drumbeat, right? It's just been building and building and building over probably the last two or three decades when they first started talking about health disparities. I remember when it popped up. Now the whole thing is to get everybody to follow the DEI agenda, which is just dangerous. It's bad everywhere, right? Because it doesn't look at you like a person. It looks like at everybody like an identity. But, you know, in the exam room, it's really dangerous because we need our doctors to look at us like patients and give us what we need. Yeah,
and let me just make note, Twyla, because there are corporations that have gone down this route of following DEI, that over this past summer, they're abandoning it. So we're not going that path anymore. They have seen how destructive this is for their company, their corporation, and yet we're trying to push it in the medical profession, and that ought to concern us.
Right. Well, you know, some of the companies have actually figured out that this is a really bad thing to do for one reason or the other, right? Because some people, you know, like us who know that DEI is a really bad thing, if we know that they're really into it, we're not going to patronize them. You know, we're not going to buy their things, right? But you know, getting rid of it is going to be a trial, particularly when you have something that's so government-funded like medical education, and when the bureaucrats really think of healthcare as the way that they can move forward all of their agendas. You know, socialist agendas, Marxist agendas. You know, the doctors, 77% of the doctors are now employees of corporations who are working hand in glove with the government. So this is one of the reasons, you know the Wedge of Health Freedom, our online directory of cash-based doctors. This is one of the reasons why we need doctors and patients to be free from all of these bureaucrats and all of these dictates and all these corporate protocols, because it's so important to our life and our quality of life that we actually have a doctor that's not biased against us.
Twyla, I'm holding in my hand right now a copy of H.R. 7725. It was introduced on March 19th, 2024, earlier this year, introduced by Congressman Greg Murphy, that would amend the Higher Education Act of 1965. This would really address the issue we're talking about right now. Tell us about this legislation.
Well, that's correct. The Educate Act, and the Educate Act would say that if you do any of this kind of DEI business in the medical school, if you force them to sign a statement, if you force them to use pronouns, for example, if you force them to embrace discriminatory practices, if you in hiring practices, you choose a black person instead of a white person solely because of their color, then the federal government will take away all your funding for medical education for the institution that's doing the medical education. So, this would be a wonderful thing. I believe there are 40 co-sponsors right now.
It's actually, I just checked it. It's 50.
I believe they're all Republicans. We really need Democrats, too.
56. I just checked it moments ago.
Oh, very good.
56 are signed onto it now, but yet they are still all Republicans, as you mentioned.
But we do, on our website, cchfreedom.org, we do have an initiative where you can quickly just click on this webpage that we have, and you can just send a message to your members of Congress and tell them to sign on to the bill to support this, the Educate Act, H.R. 7725. Really easy. You don't have to even come up with any of the words. You can just click and send. And so I do encourage everybody to come to cchfreedom.org and engage, because the last thing that you want is a doctor in the exam room who looks at you for some other reason than the condition that you have to decide whether or not and how to treat you.
Wow. Twyla, I've seen many articles coming out on the shortage of registered nurses and also alarming the shortage of medical doctors. I mean, some pretty alarming statistics. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the physician shortages, they are there's about 40% of them that are now getting to the age of retirement. There's also a boatload of them deciding that they want to retire early, and those statistics have varied over time. But what we do know is that there's a lot of doctors who are leaving. You can even talk to your friends and your family and ask them about your doctor, and a lot of them have had a doctor that has just disappeared. Well, and I think there's at least 100, but it might have even been more than that, nurses that left the profession during COVID. And so we need nurses. I'm a nurse, but we need nurses at the bedside, because you actually want a professional who, can look at you and figure out things are going wrong, even though you don't know it. Mm-hmm. and people who are there for you when you're sitting at the hospital. You need people who are actually available. And so we need both nurses and doctors, but unfortunately what the corporations are doing these days is they are replacing doctors, and there's nobody like a doctor. Nobody else has a medical license. Nobody else has been, trained medically for about 20,000 clinical hours. Nobody's like a physician, but the corporations often are replacing the physicians with non-physicians, who are very, very good people who have a certain level of skills, but they do not have a medical license, and they do not have all those 20,000 hours of clinical practice. So really what we're looking at is a healthcare system that is moving away from medical expertise. There will be people to see you. There'll be people to listen to your story. There'll be people to maybe even diagnose you correctly. But there might be also people who don't know how to diagnose you because they don't have enough skill or know how to do it. And so all they will do is follow the protocols on the computer that say how you should be treated, because they don't have enough skill to know different. We really do need to have sufficient physicians for America. We have, I think it's 67 million people in Medicare today, and by 2033, I think there'll be 73 million people in Medicare. Where are all these people going to go if doctors start disappearing? And the government isn't giving them any reason to stay. Instead, they're piling more regulations, more paperwork. They're making it difficult for them to be independent, so that puts them under corporate control. They've got all these penalties for not following protocols or not doing quality health care as deemed by the government to be quality. And so we're giving doctors and nurses a reason to leave because they came to take care of people. They didn't come to take care. They didn't get their education to take care of a chart.
Right.
To, fill in all the boxes.
Fill in the boxes, yeah.
Dot all the I's.
And, that's conversation my wife and I have had as well, is that, they want to treat, not all, but there are those who want to treat, but you have to fit inside that box. And even though your conditions go outside the box, we have to treat you according to the box. And it just doesn't work that way.
No, and there never used to be boxes, right?
Right,
there just
right.
used to be prescription pads and order pads and paper charts, and you could write anything you wanted.
Mm-hmm. So when you refer to you're referring to PAs, correct? Physician assistants?
There are physician assistants. There are nurse practitioners. All of them are, non-physicians that are being put in place sometimes of physicians across the country. And the Affordable Care Act, or sometimes called Obamacare, gave all of this money to educate and bring up these nurse practitioners. And so I think I looked at the statistic recently, and I thought it was like graduating. No, I'm going to be wrong. I'm not going to say it. But let's just say there's lots and lots and lots more nurse practitioners being graduated because there's so much federal money to make that happen. And so, one of the things that even concerned nurse practitioners will talk about is the fact that there are these diploma mills. So a nurse, or even somebody who's not a nurse, can become a nurse practitioner by mostly doing online study. And then hopefully they can find a nurse to follow to help with their clinical skills. But can you imagine that there are some people who aren't even a nurse who can become nurse practitioners? So they haven't even done nursing. And they get a few more hours and suddenly they're in there as a nurse practitioner who's able to practice independently, separate from a physician in about 27 states.
Wow. Twyla, you mentioned Medicare just a bit ago. They just turned 59 years old late last July. It's facing some challenges.
Well, yeah. I do an entire presentation on the facts about Medicare, lest anybody thinks this is a healthy program. That is so true. Because just as one idea, so I'll start with this. In 2036, the Medicare trustees say that Medicare will be insolvent. That means it will not have any extra money, and only the money that comes in from payroll taxes will be available to take care of patients and to pay their bills, right? And so they say that there's about 11% of bills that will not be paid. Well, just look at this the way with a number from 2022. So in 2022, Medicare paid $905 billion to take care of the population that year. Now, if 11% of the bills were not paid, that would be $99.55 billion of medical bills that would not be covered by the government. So then you've just got to think, who's going to cover them, or what does that mean for patients? And are doctors going to eat those costs because Medicare payments are already low? Just ask any Medicare patient and look at what Medicare actually pays compared to what is charged. And so we're looking at a program that's dying. It's dying, and the government is trying to put everybody into a Medicare Advantage plan because the Medicare Advantage plans are allowed to ration care to seniors that the plans declare to be medically unnecessary. However, the federal government has already come out with 3 reports since 2015 about how Medicare Advantage plans are rationing care to seniors. Not just any old care, but actually medically necessary care that Medicare would approve. The health plans are saying no. Then if the person appeals, 75% of the time they will overturn the denial and give you the care. But only 1% of people ever appeal, so they get to keep all that money.
Yeah. So the appeal is so important. Don't just take a denial, rather appeal it. Vast majority are approved after that. Well, friends, we're also going to be taking a look at, where do the candidates stand? What's ahead for us in healthcare challenges? Back in a minute here on Crosstalk.
How can 3 persons be one God? Does the Bible support slavery? Is homosexuality acceptable to God? Hundreds of questions just like these are addressed in the Big Book of Bible Answers by respected Bible scholar Ron Rhodes. Is it okay for Christians to get hypnotized? Is suicide an unforgivable sin? Why was Abel's offering acceptable by God when Cain's wasn't? Consisting of over 400 pages, Ron addresses some of the most common questions about the Bible, about God, Jesus, salvation, angels and demons, prophecy and the afterlife, with clear, concise answers. This is a go-to for the many topics and challenges that come your way. The Big Book of Bible Answers, available from VCY for a donation of $20 or more. Request it with your donation when you call 1-800-729-9829.
The program is called Crosstalk, coming your way from the VCY America Network, and our guest, Twyla Braze from the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. Their website, cchfreedom.org. We're just touching on a few issues going on right now, friends, but you'll find a lot of information there, cchfreedom.org. Twyla, let's talk about the November elections that are getting closer and closer by the day and how this is going to impact the matter of health care. But you're from the state of Minnesota. What have you observed about Governor Walz, the running mate now to Kamala Harris, that perhaps many do not know? What have you experienced in Minnesota under his leadership?
Well, of course, he was a lockdown leader. I think that's a really important thing to understand. He not only locked down the state once when everybody else was being locked down, March, April, and May, but he also came back in November and locked it down again and limited public gatherings and limited, hours of businesses being open, et cetera. So he's definitely in that camp of being perfectly willing to lock you down. And then he is supportive of medical care or using taxpayer funding for illegals. And the transgender issue, he signed the bill that made Minnesota a trans refuge state, which means that you can come from any other state in the union and nobody in Minnesota is allowed to report you if you're in a state that, forbids this kind of procedures on the young to, change their or try to change their gender, right? And he also, is perfectly happy to keep our tax. We have a state tax called the Minnesota Care Tax. He's perfectly happy to keep that going rather than getting rid of it when it would have sunset. So, when it comes, and I think if I recall correctly, I don't remember his statement, but I believe he's probably way more for a universal, one-size-fits-all medical system rather than individual free market healthcare.
Wow. And I don't see him abandoning any of those views as he's running with Kamala Harris, but perhaps being just a mirror reflecting the very places where she stands on these issues as well.
Well, you had to wonder why she picked him, but I think maybe it is because they are very similar, which is very, very progressive or very, very on the socialist side of things, right? I think one thing about Kamala that a lot of people don't know and doesn't come up, but because I'm on this interview, I think it might be of interest to everybody who donates to organizations, but it was Kamala Harris in her position as AG in California, which she was the first one to say that the list of the organizations, the nonprofit, the charitable organizations, the list that's in their 990 that lists all the names of anyone who gave $5,000 and more, that has always been only sent to the IRS, but she demanded it. She demanded it for every nonprofit that solicited funds in California and then put the names online.
My.
There was the case went all the way to the Supreme Court and said that couldn't happen anymore. That can't happen anymore. They cannot require that anymore, but it was Kamala who first did that. to nonprofits around the country.
So as you look at the matter of health care and the challenges that are ahead, how would you assess a Trump-Vance ticket and compared to a Harris-Walz ticket on health care issues?
Well, I can't do any electioneering, so I don't want to tell anybody how to vote or anything like that. But I guess I would just say that, one is to the left, one is to the right, and there's a whole bunch of things in the middle that we don't necessarily know. And so even like Vance has, he's a venture capitalist, and he has his fingers in all sorts of healthcare corporations, from data to medical devices to pharma. And we don't have any idea exactly if he's free market or if he's whatever the government can do to make those businesses grow stronger. We don't have any idea. We do know that when it comes to illegal immigrants getting health care, that Kamala is all for it, and she believes that health care is a human right, that nobody should be denied it. And whereas on the Vance-Trump side, we know, and Vance has said, no Medicare, no Medicaid for illegals, so we know that for sure. And Trump has also said something similar. And none of them have said anything about a right to health care for every human being. And, of course, a right to health care for every human being means socialized medicine. You just create a government program. The government decides who gets everybody gets coverage, right? But that doesn't mean everybody gets the care that they need, because then the government decides, or their collaborators, in this case the health plans, because they'd probably use the health plans as public utilities. Those public utilities, health plans, would decide whether or not you got care. And like in England, I think England still has it where if you are over the age of 65, you cannot get a kidney transplant. In the United States today, 65 is pretty young. But that's what happens when you have a health care for all, which just means that you get a certificate that says you're covered, but it doesn't mean that you get anything on the certificate. That's no guarantee.
Yeah. So what, in just brief, what do you see as some of the healthcare challenges that are going to lie ahead here in this next presidential term?
Well, certainly Medicare. Everybody's trying to solve Medicare. And I should say that about Trump, because Trump has said, he's not going to touch Medicare or Social Security. Well, they have to be touched. They have to be touched because they're running out of money and people are locked into them. They have nowhere to go. Social Security is something you've been promised, you gave money toward. That's one thing. But Medicare, you're locked into that, because if you don't accept Medicare, then you will not get your Social Security. And most people can't do without their Social Security. They're depending on it, right? But we do have to give people who don't need Medicare, and for future generations to plan to not have Medicare in their future, we need to give them a way out. So we have to take away that coupling that the Clintons did, not lawfully. There's no law that requires you to take Medicare or you can't get your Social Security. We got an executive order from Trump in 2019 to disconnect those two, but then COVID intervened and then Biden rescinded the order. But this is something that has to be touched, and there has to be freedom from Medicare in our future, or we will all be in a government program with other people determining when our lives have value, when we can get access to care, because it's running out of money and the rationing is just going to become even more rampant than it is today. Yeah. So that's got to be touched.
Okay. 2036 to be insolvent is the report right now. Friends, we're opening our phone line. Our number 800-733-9829. We've hit a number of issues today pertaining to health care and taking your questions for Twyla. 800-733-9829. Twyla, you at Citizens Council for Health Freedom have an event coming up on October 3rd. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we're very excited to have Dr. Mary Talley Bowden as our keynote speaker. So this is our annual fundraising event, and she agreed to come and talk to us about her battle with the bureaucracy. So she is the one physician that was deemed to be the one person of the lawsuit that actually had standing, and so she won the lawsuit against the FDA. They were accused, the lawsuit accused them of practicing medicine by telling people not to take ivermectin. And so she won in March, and she's going to talk to us about that amazing win and that boondoggle with the bureaucrats as they tried to wiggle their way out of being accused, and as they tried to, get past the lawsuit, and they just couldn't. And so it's going to be very exciting. She's also in our Wedge of Health Freedom. She's an independent, cash-based doctor from Houston. That event is taking place Thursday, October 3rd in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is really close to our Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. It's just a suburb. And so you can go to CCH Freedom. Anybody who's listening can go to cchfreedom.org and sign up. And early bird pricing ends on Friday, September 6th. So I really encourage you to come. I, of course, will be speaking, and we'll have a very special guest that we're not talking about, a legislative leader that is coming. And so it's going to be a very special night. And so I really encourage listeners to come.
Again, the city state for this is?
This is Minneapolis and Minnesota, a suburb of it.
Okay. And friends, again, that's October 3rd. More info at cchfreedom.org. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Let's begin with Greg in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Greg, you're on the air.
Hi. Glad both of you are doing well today. Interesting program. I might have misheard you. I thought you said that you had to take Medicare in order to get Social Security. But I've been on Social Security for 9 years, and I don't have Medicare.
But you had to sign up for Medicare at age 65 or suffer a penalty.
No, that's not true.
Twyla.
Well, it is true. So it's probably a special situation, or the fact that as soon as you take your Social Security, they automatically sign you up for Medicare. Now, whether you decide to use Medicare or not, because maybe you have employment that is, maybe you're still being employed, and maybe you have a company that you're in that is 20 or more employees. If you are self-employed and you have less than 20 employees in that company, you are forced to sign up for Medicare unless you don't want your Social Security. So there are some, conditions.
You're referring to Part A, correct, Twyla?
I do.
Yeah, Part A.
I do agree with you on one point, but I think where maybe I misunderstood, and maybe some other listeners misunderstood. In a way, I am signed up for Medicare, but only Part A,
yes,
which covers only being in the hospital.
Right.
I don't have B, C, or D or anything where I have to pay any money.
That's correct. Yeah, we're on the same page here. It is Part A that you are required to at age 65.
Yes,
okay,
and you do
that's where I messed up. I misunderstood that. Sorry. Have a beautiful day, folks.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry about that confusion.
Greg, thank you so very much for the call. Let's go to Clarksburg, West Virginia. And Scott, you're on the air.
Yeah, I have a question. You said that doctors in their medical school are being taught DEI, but I was wondering how the licensors in the different states and the federal licensors, how they try to make them have policies that follow DEI, in employee training and stuff like that.
So far, I have not heard that it's coming out of the boards of medicine or the what other kind. Oh, there's all the different kind of credentialing organizations, but that doesn't mean anything that I haven't heard it, because it's amazing what I will learn because it's such a deep and thick and wide issue, healthcare. But this is really coming out of the medical schools, the federal dollars. The federal government itself is pushing DEI everywhere, and so it's likely coming out of that to conform with that. The whole health disparities, there's a bunch of language in federal law having to do with health disparities and health equity, and there are departments of health equity in a lot of state health departments. And so it's probably coming from a whole variety of places, but now we see it particularly in the medical schools where they want the doctors to actually, sign a creed or, agree to a statement or whatever that is actually against their belief system.
Wow. Twyla Braid's with us here today on Crosstalk. A quick break. We'll come back to more of your phone calls. I say I've got two open lines yet, 800-733-9829. Back in 1 minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. I've been teaching through the book of Revelation on Sunday nights, and recently, as we uncovered the truth of Revelation chapter 4, I am overwhelmed by the picture that John paints. The Lord God on his throne, being worshipped by what is the highest order of angels, I believe, who represent his character and his nature. Their eyes, which see before them, behind them, and all around them. They represent God's all-knowing wisdom. He's everywhere. He's aware of what's happening to us at all times. He clothes the lily of the fields. He's aware when a sparrow falls. And yet there he is being worshipped day and night. Think about that for a minute, folks. The creator God of the universe, who is surrounded by the highest order of angels that are worshiping him, he's aware of you today, and providentially, for believers, he's making a way for us. I hope that encourages you.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America, covering a number of issues today, including the World Health Emergency, or the World Health Organization declaring a health emergency yesterday for Mpox. We also have the former CDC director warning about bird flu pandemic, not a matter of if, but when. We have the whole issue of the World Pandemic Preparedness Summit. We have the DEI instruction going on, the physician shortage that is going on, the increasing use of those that are not fully trained to make your healthcare decisions, and so much more here today on the program. Taking your calls, Twyla's website, cchfreedom.org. And let's get right back to the phone lines. Holding the longest, Greg in Waukesha, Wisconsin. You're on the air.
Hey. Hello, Jim, and hello to the guests. And I'll be quick, but I'm a Medicare patient because I'm disabled. I don't want to be, but that's just the way it works. So I feel often like I'm treated like a second or third class kind of citizen this way, and I'm wondering how to get my doctors to really listen to me instead of just doling out medication after medication after medication. When one medication, I've been hospitalized because, the medications each has side effects. And how do you get within this, framework of one size fits all? How do you get your doctors to really listen to you? What do you have to do? Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
So I think I'll say several things about that. I'm going to direct people to our website for our helpful handouts section, which is about 3/4 of the way down our homepage. So go to cchfreedom.org and look for a document that's called Discharge Instructions. And these are not discharged from the hospital. This is how we discharge people from our presentations with this sheet to help protect themselves in the exam room, to ask certain questions of the doctors. We have there's 6 points, and the very first one is a list of questions that you should ask your doctor to try and see if the doctor is doing the best for you or just following a protocol. So that's just one idea. So go to cchfreedom.org homepage, down to helpful handouts, and look for discharge instructions. Another one is you might just have to find another doctor. I had a physician tell me that if a doctor doesn't help you, do not stay with the doctor. The doctor might have too small of a cup. That was her words. Go find a doctor with a bigger cup that knows more, and maybe that cup has more of a mission. But the fact of the matter is, Medicare is not encouraging your doctors to take care of you if you're a complicated patient, because Medicare pays so poorly. So Medicare typically, just look at your statements, typically cuts off about 60% of whatever the charge is, 60%, and then only pays 80% of that, and then asks you to pay the rest. Now, disability that you have may work a little bit different than that, but that's typically how Medicare works. And so, if you take a lot of time, you're kind of a loss for them. And so, giving you a prescription might just be the easiest thing to do. You have to find a physician who's mission-minded, who's got integrity and is working in this very difficult system and trying to be the best real doctor, caring doctor, mission-minded doctor that he or she can be. You also might have to go find a cash-based doctor for some of your care, just to check in with one of them. And you could certainly go to jointhewedge.com and see if you could find one there who at least you could talk with like once a month to say, is the doctors that I'm on with Medicare, are they doing the right thing? And so there are different things, but you are in a hard situation because Medicare is the less money that there is in Medicare, the less care and caring there's likely to be if you are a Medicare patient. That's why we want to help people to escape.
Again, cchfreedom.org. Cindy in Sun City, Arizona, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Quick question about Medicare. I'm on Part A and Part B. They automatically enrolled me, but it costs $174 and change every month out of my Social Security. Is it possible for me to drop Part B during the open enrollment time coming up?
I think you can drop B anytime that you want, but I will tell you to understand that Medicare Part A has very significant limits on hospitalization. And you should look at it and see what they are. Look at this idea of benefit periods. Look it up, because at 150 days in the hospital, there is no money coming in from anywhere unless you have a Medigap policy. You can't get a Medigap policy unless you have a Medicare Part B.
Great.
So it's not insurance. Medicare is not insurance, because when you have a real catastrophe and you're hospitalized for a very long time, it quits giving you any money for that care.
Cindy, thank you for your call. We're going to squeeze one last call in from Cambridge, Minnesota. Amy, you're on the air.
Hello. Yes, I have a moderate aortic heart leak, also needing a total knee replacement. I've been on a Medigap plan because that was advised to me, but recently switched over to an Advantage plan, but I still could switch back. I'm still in that change back period where I could go back. I'm wondering if that would be better for me. I'm interested in in the Wedge program. However, these things require hospitalization and big care things. So I'm wondering if you would recommend the Medigap.
Okay.
Twyla,
we got just 40 seconds. Go ahead.
Yep. Okay. So I don't tell you what to do per se. I just would like to say that Medicare Advantage gets an amount of money from the government and then can choose to ration the care, and can use prior authorization to do it, and can limit the network of doctors you can go to. Original Medicare doesn't do any of that. You can go to any doctor anywhere, and as long as the doctor orders it because it's medically necessary, the government pays the bill, or they're part of the bill, right? So you look at that and decide what you want to do based on that. Since you have the opportunity to switch, now is the time to make a really good decision about that.
Thank you for your call. We are out of time. Twyla Bray's with us today. And friends, their contact information is also on their website, but you can check it out, cchfreedom.org, and learn more about the October 3rd event they have coming up as well in the Twin Cities area, cchfreedom.org. Twyla, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
And friends, thank you for joining us here on Crosstalk. You're better informed as a result, and we thank you for tuning in. And may you have a blessed day in the Lord.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.